It's kind of wild to think about, but a simple label on a map can literally decide the future of an entire landscape. And I'm not just talking about the trees and animals, but about the people who actually call it home. In Ecuador, that label, well, it's pretty much everything.
All right, so check this out. We've got two of Ecuador's most iconic treasures, the Galapagos Islands and the Chimborazo Wildlife Reserve. So what's the single most important difference between them? I'll give you a hint. It's not the animals, and it's not the altitude. It's their official name. And believe me, that one difference in their name changes the whole game.
So that's what we're going to dig into. Why getting this official label, this classification, is so incredibly important, not just for protecting nature, but for the communities who live and work on these protected lands.
Okay, so why all the fuss about a label? I mean, what's the big deal?
Well, it's because that category isn't just some bureaucratic term on a piece of paper. It is the actual blueprint for the future of that place. It spells out the conservation goals, what you can and can't do there, and crucially, who gets to have a say in how it's all managed. And look, the stakes here are unbelievably high. If you get that label wrong, you're not just looking at some sloppy conservation. No, you could end up sparking real conflict with local communities, completely failing to protect the very ecosystem you wanted to save, and throwing away massive opportunities for sustainable development.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about a few small patches of land here. As of 2025, we're looking at 78 protected areas in Ecuador that cover almost 20% of the entire country. That's huge. So the impact of these decisions is just massive.
Okay, so with a system this big and complex, how does Ecuador even begin to manage it all? Well, they've got a framework for that. It's time we get to know the National System of Protected Areas, or, as it's known, SNAP.
You can think of SNAP as a kind of conservation toolkit. Seriously, imagine a toolbox, and inside, each category is a different specialized tool designed for a very specific job, all working to protect biodiversity and the ecosystem services that, let's be honest, we all rely on.
All right, let's pop open that toolkit and see what we've got. The first set of tools you'll find, these are the heavy hitters for maximum protection. They're designed for places where the #1 goal is just to let nature be nature, with as little human interference as possible.
So you've got things like national parks and biological reserves. These are the labels you'd use for really sensitive or one-of-a-kind ecosystems. Here, the big focus is on scientific research and preservation, which often means public access is super limited.
But conservation isn't always about just putting up a fence around a piece of land. Sometimes the real magic is in finding a balance. And that's exactly what this next set of tools is all about. Balancing the protection of nature with the needs of the people who live there.
This is where things get really interesting. We're talking about categories like fauna production reserves or marine reserves. These are specifically designed to allow for controlled, sustainable activities, things like regulated fishing or harvesting. They actually integrate human activity right into the conservation plan.
And the last set of tools in our kit? These focus on that direct relationship between people and places. These categories are all about championing public enjoyment, education, and especially community-led conservation.
Yeah, this is where you'll see things like national recreation areas built for tourism and learning. But what's really key here are the community and private protected areas. These are so important because they recognize that sometimes the most effective guardians of the land are the local communities and even private landowners themselves.
Okay, so now that we've seen the tools in the box, let's circle back to where we started, that puzzle of Galapagos and Chimborazo. Now we can really see how these different labels create two totally different realities on the ground. Just look at the difference here. Galapagos is a national park. Its main goal? Strict conservation. That translates to highly regulated tourism and a focus on scientific research. But Chimborazo, it's a fauna production reserve. Its goal is sustainable use. That means it allows for things like community-led alpaca grazing, an activity that not only supports local families, but is actually part of the conservation strategy itself. See? Two different tools for two different jobs.
And hey, Galapagos and Chimborazo are just two examples. This table gives you a glimpse of just how diverse the system really is. You've got Yasuni National Park, laser-focused on conservation, and then you've got something like the Pululawa Geobotanical Reserve, which is all about protecting unique plant life. There's a specific tool for pretty much any conservation challenge you can think of.
But here's the thing. Picking the right tool from the box isn't always easy. And this brings us right to the heart of the matter, to this core conflict in modern conservation.
It's the tension that pops up when these big national goals, often set by experts in a city, run smack into the day-to-day reality of local communities.
Let's really break this down. Imagine you declare an area a national park. That could mean imposing some really severe restrictions on using natural resources, which might just cut off families from their traditional ways of making a living. But if you classify it as a fauna production reserve, you could be opening a door for those same communities to continue their way of life just sustainably. The label you choose has direct, real-world consequences.
Now, there is an official process for creating these areas. It has 7 steps, but step 5 is absolutely critical. It's called participatory consultation and validation with communities. This is the moment, right here, where local voices are supposed to be heard. If this step goes well, you can get some amazing outcomes. But if it fails, well, that's when you can get years of deep-seated conflict.
And so all of this brings us to the fundamental question, right? This isn't just about biology or ecology anymore. It's really about power. It's about rights, and it's about who gets to control the land.
The source material we're looking at puts this question right on the table, and it's a powerful one. It asks, is it legitimate for a local community to manage a protected area under a different category than the one the government suggests, especially if their choice makes more sense for their needs and their context?
And that right there is the core tension. On one hand, you have the right of communities to have a say in their own future, on their own land. But on the other hand, you have the government's need for a unified national system with clear standards to make sure conservation is actually working across the entire country. Which leaves us with one final, really provocative question to think about. When it comes down to actually drawing these incredibly powerful lines on a map, who should be the one holding the pen? Should it be the experts in the capital city, or should it be the communities whose entire lives are shaped by those very lines? There's no easy answer here, and that debate is right at the very heart of conservation today.